Let's start with a name you might not have heard before, Maximinus Thrax. He was a Roman emperor who ruled only a few short years, from 235 to 238 CE. And yet, his reign is one of those moments in history that tells us far more than we expect. Maximinus doubled the army's pay, cut back on the grain dole that kept Rome's urban poor fed, and ignored the Senate entirely. That might sound like just another ancient power struggle, but here's why it matters. Maximinus represents the moment when Rome stopped pretending to be a republic or even an empire that cared about its citizens, and became, in effect, a military pay-state. From then on, emperors rose and fell not by civic virtue, not by the prosperity of their cities, not by the old traditions of Mos Maiorum, but by the loyalty of the army and the gold to pay them. Now fast forward nearly 2,000 years. Look around America today. Military spending is at record levels, dwarfing that of the next 10 nations combined. Meanwhile, our social safety nets, food stamps, housing assistance, public health care, urban infrastructure are steadily chipped away. Cities decay while defense budgets grow. Sound familiar? It should, because we are replaying Rome's fatal mistake. This video is going to walk through that comparison. We'll look at how Maximinus Thrax's policies helped trigger the crisis of the 3rd century and how America's military first priorities today echo the same logic. And by the end, I want to leave you with one big, uncomfortable question. Are we watching the end of our own Pax Americana, just as Maximinus marked the end of the Pax Romana? Before Maximinus, Rome had centuries of stability. Not perfect, full of wars, yes, but relatively ordered. Historians call it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, roughly from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius. During this period, the empire flourished because it balanced three things: military strength, Rome's legions were unrivaled, defending borders and projecting power; civic life. Cities thrived with roads, aqueducts, theatres and grain doles. Rome was still a society, not just an army camp. Tradition and legitimacy, the Senate and Mos Maiorum gave the empire continuity. Even if emperors held real power, they still went through the motions of respecting Rome's old traditions. It was this balance that gave Rome stability. Soldiers were paid, yes, but not at the expense of the grain supply. Cities were funded, aqueducts built, temples raised. And senators, while often sidelined, still felt they had a role to play. The point is, Rome functioned because it wasn't just about the military, it was about the people. Now enter Maximinus Thrax in 235 CE. He was different from every emperor before him. He wasn't aristocratic, he wasn't senatorial, he wasn't even Italian. He was a Thracian peasant who rose through the army ranks, a giant of a man, said to be over 8 feet tall. His power base wasn't the Senate or the people of Rome, it was the army, pure and simple. So what did he do once he took power? He doubled the soldiers' pay. This brought him immediate loyalty, but it drained the treasury and forced heavier taxation on civilians. He cut the grain dole. That meant fewer free rations for the urban poor of Rome. In a city of 1 million people, that was a recipe for unrest. He ignored the Senate. For the first time, the Senate was completely sidelined. Maximinus didn't even bother with the appearance of cooperation. The message was clear. The army mattered, everyone else did not. What was the result? The army loved him, at least for a while, but the loyalty he bought was shallow. Soldiers expected pay raises forever. Once you start bribing an army, you can't stop. The Senate hated him. They saw him as a barbarian thug who disrespected tradition. This led to open revolt. The cities suffered. Cutting the grain dole meant discontent in Rome and other urban centres. Civil life began to unravel. This short reign triggered the crisis of the 3rd century, 50 years of chaos, during which more than 20 emperors rose and fell, endless civil wars, frontier invasions, economic collapse. A once stable empire devolved into near anarchy, all because the emperor chose to secure his position by buying the army and abandoning everyone else. Now, let's shift gears, because this isn't just about ancient history. Look at America today. Military spending is astronomical, over $800 billion a year, more than the next 10 countries combined. Meanwhile, Programs that support ordinary citizens are constantly under pressure. Housing subsidies cut, food assistance reduced, urban infrastructure left to crumble, student debt relief blocked. We are, in effect, choosing the same priorities Maximinus did: spend lavishly on the military, cut back on the social safety net, and ignore the conditions of our cities. And just like Rome, the justification is always the same: security. We must fund the army to protect the empire. But what happens when the empire rots from within? One of the most telling parallels is the decline of cities. In Rome, the grain dole wasn't just about food. It was about keeping the urban population invested in the empire. Cutting it meant alienating the very people who gave Rome its cultural vitality. Theatres, baths, libraries, all of these, withered as resources, were funneled to the frontier. In America, we see something similar. Our great cities, once the engines of prosperity, are in decline. Crumbling infrastructure, failing schools, homelessness, urban poverty. Instead of rebuilding bridges and modernizing power grids, we pour money into fighter jets and overseas bases. It's the same logic. Prioritize the military, neglect the cities, and assume the empire can survive without a vibrant civic core. Spoiler, it can't. Another striking similarity is the contempt for tradition. Rome's Senate may have been corrupt, but it was still a symbol of continuity. Ignoring it entirely broke the last threads of legitimacy. Maximinus ruled by force alone, and once the Senate turned against him, his days were numbered. America doesn't have a Senate in the Roman sense, but we do have institutions meant to balance power: legislatures, civic bodies, even unwritten social contracts. Yet increasingly those are sidelined by executive decisions justified on grounds of national security. The old traditions, that government should serve the people, that prosperity should be shared, are treated as quaint. Just as Maximinus treated Mos Maiorum as irrelevant, we treat our own civic traditions as obstacles to military efficiency. There's also the money trap. Rome discovered that once you doubled soldier pay, you could never go back. Each new emperor had to offer more, higher pay, larger bonuses to secure loyalty. The result was constant inflation, higher taxes, and eventually economic collapse. Sound familiar? America's defense budget is the same kind of trap. Once set at astronomical levels, it only goes up every year. New programs, new weapons, new bases. Meanwhile, any talk of expanding the social safety net is dismissed as unaffordable. Rome debased its coinage to keep up with the bills. America prints debt. The mechanism is different, but the logic is the same. Military spending first, civic stability last. What's the real lesson here? It's not just that Rome spent too much on the army, it's that Rome forgot what made it strong in the first place. The Republic was built on citizen farmers, civic duty and shared sacrifice. When Rome replaced those farmers with slaves and those citizens with dependents, it hollowed out its base. Maximinus was just the first emperor to say the quiet part out loud. Only the army matters. America risks the same fate. We were built on the promise of opportunity, on the idea that citizens matter, that free labor ennobles a person, that civic life matters. But when we gut our safety nets, neglect our cities and pour everything into the military, we're saying the same thing Maximinus did. Only the army matters. And just like Rome, that path leads to collapse. Rome survived Maximinus, but only barely. The crisis of the 3rd century nearly destroyed the empire. It fractured into pieces, saw its economy collapse, and was only patched back together by brute force. But even then, it never truly recovered. The West limped on for another 2 centuries before finally collapsing. By then, the cities were hollow shells, the Senate irrelevant, the economy gutted, and the army little more than mercenaries. So ask yourself, if America keeps going down this road, what comes after? A patchwork of military-first policies, debt crises, urban decline, and endless wars? Or can we learn from Rome's mistake before it's too late? Maximinus Thrax may seem like a minor figure, but his policies mark the death of the Pax Romana. By doubling army pay, cutting the grain dole, and ignoring the Senate, he showed what happens when a state stops caring about its citizens and cares only about its soldiers. America is walking the same road. Military spending grows, safety nets shrink, cities decline. We tell ourselves it's for security, but history shows that no empire survives when its core rots from neglect. So maybe the real question isn't whether America is Rome. The real question is, are we already at our own Maximinus moment? If that made you uncomfortable, good. That was the point. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think America is repeating Rome's mistakes? Or do you think we're strong enough to change course? Let's talk about it.